Politics, SAS, and I am from there.
Hello, I'm Vanita. I'm architect planner, currently pursuing PhD from IIT Roorkee, and I grew up in Hyderabad.
Hi, I'm Rupa Singh and I'm an architect and planner, and I grew up in Jharkhand. And sir is my professor, he taught me in my masters at CEPT University.
You remember me.
Hello everyone, my name is Dipali. I am currently doing PhD from CSRD JNU.
Hello, my name is Seth Salim. I've done my MA and MPhil from CSRD and Certificate. Doing my PhD in CSRD only on women members of Cornell Equity.
Hi, I'm Shanchari. I'm from CSRD itself. I'm doing my research right now, PhD, and I grew up in West Bengal.
I'm Raya Ghosh. I come from Kolkata itself, and I'm doing my MPhil in CSRD.
Hi everyone, I'm Chetan Asgar, a doctoral candidate in Center for the Study of Regional Development in JNU, and I grew up in Kolkata.
Hello, I'm Sruti from Delhi. I'm a student at Zakir Hussain Center for Educational Studies.
Hi, I'm Shreya. I'm from Calcutta and I'm pursuing my PhD in sociology here in India.
Hi, I'm Shubhit. I'm from the Department of Political Science from Ram University in Chandigarh, and I belong to Chile.
Hi, I'm Nidhi and I'm doing my MPhil under Professor Acharya, and I'm from Pilani, Rajasthan.
Hi, I'm Evie. I'm doing my PhD from CSRD JNU and I grew up in Dibrugarh. That's Tamil Nadu.
Hi, I'm currently pursuing a PhD on issues related to the urban studies, and I'm from West Bengal, Murshidabad East.
So I think I'm the last man remaining. I'm Shravan Acharya. I teach in CSRD, basically urban planner. So I think now we start.
Okay, so everybody is comfortable, you can take notes. So let me go over या आपको मूव करते रहना पड़ेगा. I intend to walk a little while at least. Okay. So let me go over the course structure of it with you. And so this Shravan and I developed. We spent quite some time going back and forth over this, and this is still tentative. Okay, things will change as we move along. We might have technology issues because of that, or we might come up with something more interesting than this during our discussion, and we are flexible. We will start with an overview of the emerging trends and challenges it creates and opportunities it creates for planning for cities, for better quality of life, or whatever you want. And that's kind of an overview. We try to include a lot of things, but it's not a complete list. So at the end of this presentation, we will ask you to speak about things that you think should be included or would have been part of this. We'll do that. If this laptop cooperates, then we have a movie planned for you. Okay? It's a short documentary on challenges on the same topic of urban, right? So the tension between development and environment. Okay? We'll take a break. In the afternoon, we'll prepare you all for the fieldwork mode. Okay? So Shravan has been doing research on this particular project. So he'll give you an overview, give you some method, what to look for, how do you observe things in cities and how you document them and all. And again, I have a short video on just that method. Okay, so we'll do that. Then you can take the evening off, get some rest, and then tomorrow morning, and we'll go over that in the afternoon, but you'll have to come early and on time so that we are able to go there. We will spend good part of the day on the conservation project, and then you'll have late afternoon free, spend more time in the field, at the site. Then on Saturday, we begin the day by talking about what you learned in the field. What you learned in the field and your observations, and we have a discussion about that related to whatever goes on in the classroom today. And then in the afternoon, we'll start talking about urban transportation. So I will introduce some of the theories used in urban transportation planning, the kind of thinking you need for urban travel behavior. How is that data collected? How is that data used? And then we'll give you an exercise in which you will record your own travel behavior for 24 hours or a day. And you will do that on Sunday on your own. Okay? And then on Monday morning, we come back and we talk about data you collected. And then we go through urban transportation planning process as it is done in Canada or the US or the West. Okay? Afternoon, we will either talk about urban economics or we'll talk about neoliberal speed or something. So we're still flexible on that, how it evolves from there. And then on Tuesday, we'll talk about community design, public spaces, and challenges of inclusiveness and exclusiveness and such things. And then we'll see what to do after it. And things are likely to change between now and then, depending on your interest and what you give back to the class. Like I said, it's very interactive. It's not supposed to be a one-way. Okay. Most of the things that I will present will be from the US and Canada. And the idea is that you learn from what's happening over there, and then you think about adapting lessons to Indian context yourself, or whichever context yourself. So we are not bridging that context for you. You are supposed to be doing that yourself. Okay? And we will talk about, so how can you use this, what do you think is good for you. And at some point we'll also talk about that city profile that we asked you to create. So I hope you know that it's ready, and so we'll try to bring that in our lectures. Okay? Okay, any questions for me at this stage? Anything? If you want to talk to me or address me, please don't call me sir. That's very colonial. So I have a really nice name, Ajay. It's simple. So call me by Ajay. If you feel really uncomfortable, you can call me Dr. Agarwal or Professor Agarwal. I am very much against people in India still addressing everybody as sir. So try to get out of that habit. Okay. We don't do that. My vice chancellor, I still call him Dr. Bosch. I don't call him sir. There is no sir, right? You only call the Prime Minister of the country sir. Okay, so emerging challenges and opportunities for the contemporary city. So, cities are basically a reflection of a lot of things that go on in the society, right? So cities are a big reflection of demography. Right? So if you walk around cities in India, you find a lot of young people. Streets are filled with young people. You don't see a lot of old people because India is just still a very, very young population overall, right? So there are seniors, but there is sizable young population. If you go to Western countries, if you go to the UK or if you go to Canada or if you go to the US, you will find that the population is not as young. You can see that on streets, okay? Especially in Canada. And we'll get into details about all of this. This is just kind of the overall slide, things that I'll talk about in the next segment. But you generally find that, American cities or Canadian cities are kind of old. They're not as young. You also find lots of buildings are old. You also find that lots of infrastructure is geared towards old. Right? So staircases, for example. So the riser is very, very short, so that old people are able to walk easily. You will find that all public buildings have ramps to go up. So if you're in a wheelchair or you have mobility problems, you can walk. So cities reflect, age of the population. And Canadian cities, American cities are old and getting older because a lot of people are not having kids. There's not a whole lot of youth. And if you subtract immigrant population, then the country as a whole has become really, really old. Right? That's one part of demography. We'll get into more details. The second is, and I gave a little talk here, and I might repeat that because not everybody from that talk is here today. It doesn't Tuesday. Generation Y, or the millennials, right? So those who were born between 1980 and 2000, we call them Generation Y millennials, and they are considered to be different. And we have now evidence and data on how they are different. They are different in terms of how they travel. They are different in terms of how they educate themselves, they're different in terms of their preferences for where they live, so on and so forth. And these Generation Y, those who were born in 1980, quite a lot of them have become adults, right? Quite a lot of them have become adults and actually entered into work. A lot of them are still into college and not working, but they've reached adulthood, right? So that is changing cities and city structure and what goes on in cities. Households have changed. So household is, all the people that live in a single housing unit household, and that has changed. That has changed in a number of ways. A lot of people now want to remain single, right? They don't have a partner or a wife or a husband. They're single, but people don't have kids because men and women both are more serious about their career, so they want to spend more time on their careers and professions. Children are sort of a distraction. So things are changing. Again, we'll talk about it. So all this is reflected into cities, and they present both challenges and opportunities, right? So senior population is a challenge, but Generation Y reaching adulthood, that's an opportunity, right? Household structure could be both challenge and opportunity, depends on how we see. Multiculturalism / immigration, they're different things, but sort of go hand in glove. That's a big challenge. It's also a very big opportunity. Depends on how you see it, and we'll get into some discussion about that. Rising incomes. Globally, people are becoming richer. Americans are getting richer, Canadians are getting richer, Indians are getting richer, Chinese are getting richer. So there is general better quality of life with rising incomes, but there is also a big income disparity. Right? So the richest 5% have become exponentially more rich, and the poor may have become a little bit rich, but that disparity, the gap between the rich and the poor, has increased. It has increased a whole lot in India, but it has also increased a whole lot in the rich world, right? In the US or Canada. And that creates tensions in cities, and that has opportunity challenge. Internet is a big opportunity. So even in India now, getting internet access is very, very easy. I have a JioFi device which I bought for 1,000 rupees, and every time I come to India, I just put a SIM card and I have internet everywhere all the time. And that has created a lot of different opportunities for people. It has created a lot of challenge. So I had to ask you all to put off your cell phones, because some of you might have already been WhatsApping, right? Sitting in a classroom. Environment is very interesting, right? So people have generally become, and this is again related to a little bit Generation Y, more aware about the environment and aware about how their actions and what they do affects environment, right? That doesn't mean that we are not damaging the environment anymore. It just means we are aware that we are damaging, right? We are still drinking water out of plastic bottles, but we know that this plastic bottle is bad for the environment, which was probably not the case 15, 20 years ago. So we'll go through all these topics in a little bit more. Okay? And feel free to sort of ask me questions or ask me to elaborate on a few things. And try to disagree a lot. Okay? That's the fun in classroom, right? Disagree a lot. So we can have a debate and you can all have a cross debate. Okay, so let's start with demographic change. Okay. So, number of older persons worldwide is expected to double by 2050. Okay, and you cannot see the whole slide, but there is source of all this at the bottom. Okay. So that is very interesting. Okay. So in general, people get a lot better nutrition now than their children. That comes with rising incomes, that comes with prosperity. That means that they have a healthier adulthood. They have access to better medical facilities. Medicine as a field has evolved a whole lot. So life expectancy has increased. Okay? So instead of dying at the age of 45 or 50, it became 65 or 70, and now 80 plus is not uncommon. You find huge number of Canadians who are 80 plus years old. They have lots of challenges, mobility challenges, and they're not productive, and they're a big strain on the healthcare system and all of that. But nonetheless, they add to the population. So there is shrinking of population at the bottom because Canadians are not having as many children, and Americans are not having as many children. So a growing number. So that's that. 1 in 8 people age 60 or over in 2017, that's right now, it's Canadian data, and then 1 in 5, in 2050. So, and if you see at this chart here, right, it shows, countries that are aged, and so this right here, 18. So you see, Africa is not that much aging, still very poor, still not much nutrition. People don't live as long, but pretty much all over other world, people are aging. Okay, so that's kind of a global. It creates a lot of challenges. For the seniors. First is independence. Seniors, or those who are, and we could argue who to call a senior, but 65, the retirement age, is not a senior anymore. People are really very physically fit until they are about 70 to 70 in Canada, so they can drive themselves. But progressively, they lose their sort of cognition skills, and their reflexes become slow, and they cannot react so fast. And since most Canadian, American, Western cities, they are built for driving. To do anything, you have to get in your car and drive. It creates a big problem because these people cannot drive themselves. They rather not drive because their reflexes are not fast, which means that their mobility is restrained and they're losing independence. Now they have to either ask their son, grandson, somebody else to take them to the doctor, take them for shopping. Or they have to, if they have money, they can go in a taxi. But even then, they might need a wheelchair, or they might have, crutches or walkers or something. So that's one way, they are losing independence in terms of mobility. A lot of business is carried on cell phones, right? And banks want you to do all the banking on the internet, and everything is about the internet. And these people may not be very tech savvy, right? I think every other year or 2 years, I don't know much about it myself, but your apps stop working. You have to upgrade your system. Old apps will not work. And I find myself, and I'm only 46, I'm not able to keep up with all this technology, right? So I had some issues with my laptop, and I was asking in the room, can somebody help me? Because I cannot understand this technology. Now think about this old man who's 80 years old. How will he deal if we make our cities, the whole world around us, with technology? Is there an interface for this guy to keep his independence, right? Or he has to ask somebody each time, help me do this, help me do that, right? Anything, railway reservation tickets, flight tickets, train tickets, everything is on the internet. So that's one. Second is isolation. And isolation comes in many different forms, right? You are isolated because you cannot travel much, you cannot drive, you cannot travel much, you're physically isolated. There's also emotional isolation. So I live in Canada, my parents live in India, and they can still travel a little bit to Canada, but they're kind of emotionally isolated. Now this is extreme example. But the same thing could be happening in a city, right? So your kids move out, they go to college wherever, they may be in a different city, the same country. They are not connected to you. Creates isolation, right? Creates isolation. Now, if in a city we do not have spaces where these old people can go and connect with others in the city, right? They are not interested in going to Priya, PVR. right? They are not interested in perhaps going to a bar or a cafe or a Starbucks like you. Right? They need different kinds of socializing spaces where they can connect with other people, maybe their age, maybe younger. Right? So if we are not creating spaces like that in a city, we are by design isolating. Okay? And so it's only now that Canadians and Americans have started thinking about creating spaces for the elderly. Right? And we can talk about that more as we move along in the course. Okay? Freedom of movement, I've covered, and ease of exercise. Okay? It's all both physical and related to mental. And overall, it has a big sort of challenge for quality of life of the seniors. And if your country has 1/5 of its population that is seniors, that's a challenge for the entire country. Right? It's challenge for everyone. And it's a very, very big challenge for city planners. Right? Because we do not tend to really think about seniors when you're designing anything in the city or planning anything in the city. Right? So if you look at that bottom picture, it's a very regular street. Anywhere, it could be anywhere in US and Canada, right? There are 3 lanes of traffic coming this way, 3 lanes of traffic going that way, right? Then there will be a small strip for bicycle. It's a quite wide street, but these are common everywhere. And this person who's on a mobile chair and this woman who's walking, they are both pretty old. How much time will it take them to cross a street, right? So things such simple or such things which you do not even think in your mind twice, crossing the street, is a challenge for them. Right? So if that red light is not long enough, they may be in the middle of the crosswalk when the traffic starts moving. And it used to do that until about 15, 18 years back, and people would patiently let them cross the street. And now people are thinking about, okay, at age of 75 or at age of 80, how long does it take for a man and a woman to walk to be able to cross the street? So a red light has to be at least that much so that they are able to cross the street. Big picture. I just gave you an example how city planning has to think about these people, and it's a growing challenge. It's not a challenge yet in India of the same proportion as Canada, but it's coming. Okay. This is kind of very Canadian. So, some of you may not know, but healthcare in Canada is 100% free for all its citizens. Okay? There are no private hospitals, there are no private doctors. You go, you get treated, you come out. Right? You don't pay anything. Okay? So if you have a citizen, everything is free. Okay? And this again has a lot of implications for cities and planning, because the more money is spent on healthcare, then less money is available to spend on other activities, right? Simple economics, public goods. And if you connect this to the previous slide, if you do not care about seniors in terms of addressing their isolation, in terms of addressing their independence, in terms of their quality of life, then the healthcare expense needed for them increases a whole lot. Okay? Because then they will get depression, and they have to be treated for depression. They will get whatever comes with kind of mental illness. Okay? And these numbers will increase exponentially. If our air is not clean, if we keep pollution at the levels Delhi has, then a lot of these seniors will have asthma, and a lot of these they will have lung cancer. So they have to be treated. So now, the way your cities are planned and the way your cities are designed influences health of the aging population, health of the seniors. It influences federal and provincial budget, which means that down the line you'll have less money to spend on things that you would like to spend. You can connect the dots, how what you do with your cities affects health and affects your national budget. Okay? I just put this slide there just to explain the seriousness of the issue. Okay. Let's turn on to the young folks, like you or most of you. So we talked, who was in this class on Tuesday? Okay. First you, then you, then you. Values, preferences, social activism. Generation Y. What did you learn?
Sorry, sir.
What did you learn? Values of Generation Y from my lecture on Tuesday.
Okay, Generation Y.
Turn it on.
You differentiated between Generation X and Generation Y. So Generation X was the population which were born before 1980s, the older generation, and Generation Y is the population which is born after 1980s, the current, like we all will fall in Generation Y. So the values of Generation Y is very different than the values of Generation X. So the values are mostly, we are more tech savvy, like, and we are more involved. We have an environmental ethos, like much more involved in environmental policies, how to take care of the environment. Generation Y is more aware of that compared to X. And we also have social and political activism. We are like we are more active on Facebook or Twitter. So we are like the connectivity among the people of Generation X is much higher through social media compared to Generation X. Like Generation Y is higher than Generation X. So those were the values.
Very good. Thank you.
And
Shubham, right?
Yes.
Preferences.
Actually, preferences are like, what about the relations between the family and the friends? The way they travel or the way they take trips and the way they do things. They are just like to do things which are lot easier than the things like using the technology and for example, they do a lot of things like sharing the cabs or with transport. Then
good. Social activism.
Social activism, I think Generation Y, they are more into the social media firstly because they like to share what they are doing. Like we constantly keep uploading photos in WhatsApp, in Facebook, and in Instagram. So and also they are more socially connected with their friends via the social media, and that's not limited to a particular like distance doesn't matter now because we can connect to a person from US and from China anywhere. So
right.
I think that's all.
Okay, good. So at least some people were listening. So and I might do the same lecture again for the benefit of everybody because it's kind of very well balanced. But to give you a sort of everything in a capsule. So Generation Y are people born between 1980 and 2000, right? And those who are not hard edges, different people would, say 1983 to 2005 or 1983 to 1998, depending on how they are doing their research design. But Generation Y, generally the young generation, people from your age group, okay? Generally those age group. And it is kind of sort of established now that this generation has systematically different values than their parents and grandparents. And that's nothing new, right? Every generation has its own values, and so their values are a little bit different. And for example, they may value their career over families more than their parents did. And the parents probably value their career over families more than their grandparents. So that's a value shift. In terms of preferences, there's a whole lot that is different. Okay, there's a whole lot that is different. So first of all, Generation X, which is the parents' generation, really wanted to live in large houses with front lawn and back lawn, right? And that was sort of the American dream. That I'll get a job, I'll buy a big house, with a lot of greenery front and back, 3-car garage, and that house will be in a suburban location, which means that it will be, 20-25 kilometers from the city center or the downtown. So then you drove every morning 40 minutes, 45 minutes to work, and then every evening back. Almost all housing, not 100%, but almost all housing built since the World War II and until 2000-2005 was this suburban style housing. Okay, maybe 1 floor, maybe 2 floors, 3 or 4 bedrooms, large yard in the front, large yard in the back, and 2-car garage as a minimum, but increasingly 3-car garage. So that was kind of general. With Generation Y, it's completely opposite. They don't want to live in large houses in suburbs. They want to live in small flats or apartments, studios, in the city center. Okay? So they want to live very close to where they work, where they can walk to work, or they can take a public transportation to work, or a bus, or whatever, or they can bike to work, right? So different preferences, housing preferences. And that has resulted in very different kind of city now. So for a very long time, urban planners and researchers and scholars were struggling with the idea of urban revitalization in US and Canada, right? Because nobody wanted to live in the city center. So city centers used to become dead after 5 or 6, right? Once people were done working, they would just go home, there will be nothing. And that gave rise to a lot of crime because there's not enough activity, then it's a safe haven for criminals, drug dealing, all of that. And that sort of reinforced the staying away from the center thing, right? Because if there's a crime in a neighborhood, then you don't want to buy your house there, you want to live far from there. And so for a very long time, people were struggling with how to revitalize city centers. Generation Y, just because of their housing preferences, has completely changed this. Because they want to live in downtowns, and builders are very smart, right? They are able to figure out market needs much before researchers and planners and scholars. They started building 15, 20, 25-story towers with really tiny apartments. 600 square feet, really small, one hall with a kitchen and a toilet, it's called a studio or efficiency, and tower after tower of this. And all these Generation Y millennials, young folks, live here. They don't have a family. That's another value shift, right? So they want to remain single, don't want to marry, don't want to have children. So you have a lot of time in the evening because you don't have to go to your home for anything. So now, people started building bars and cafes and pubs and clubs and discos or whatever. So the entire texture of downtown, the entire texture of city, central city, completely changed in last, about 10, 12 years. So fast. And if you Google, after this lecture is over, Toronto condominiums, you will get thousands of images of these tall towers, cranes, construction going full blown. Okay, that has changed. A big preference shift for them was to not drive. So the American dream was, get in your car, drive 45 minutes until you buy the biggest house you can afford and live. And these people, family is not a preference, family is not a good value, don't want to drive. 16 years is the age when an American or Canadian could apply for a driver's license. So you get a learner's permit for a few years and then you get a general license. There were times when the day you turned 16, you lined up at the office to get your learner's permit. Now we are finding in data that these Generation Y young adults, they don't get license until they are 24, 25 years of age, which means that they don't really care about driving. Right? They don't want to buy a car and they don't want to drive. So again, big shift. And for almost 100 years, all American cities and all Canadian cities were built around the car. And we get to that later on in the class. So the whole city is built around the car. Right? So those 6-lane streets that I said, so common because for 60 years or 70 years, cities have been built, providing those 6-lane streets. Lots of parking. Because if everybody is driving, they have to park their car somewhere. I know Indian cities are a big contrast because Indian cities were never built for cars. They were built for two-wheelers and cycles, and that's why you don't find enough parking. Because in the last 15 or 20 years, a lot of people have started buying cars. Yeah. So big. Okay, let's move.
I think the shift in perception of living in apartments or condominiums, as you say, is because of the choice to live close to the workplace. And earlier it was not this issue with the people who were born for 80s maybe. And also coming to the driving aspect, what you were saying, earlier the traffic was not so much. Now the traffic is so much that people would not drive and choose a public transit and not waste time in driving, rather live close to the workplaces. And because of this choices, the increase maybe in apartments or high-rise buildings.
I agree with your first point. I agree with your first point. The second point, I do not agree 100%. That it's not because of traffic that they are not driving. It's just that driving is unproductive, right? Because if you're driving, you cannot work on your cell phone, you cannot chat, you cannot text, right? If you're sitting in a bus, you can do all those things. Okay? So that's one sort of part of the story. The second part is driving is expensive. So if you want to buy a car, you have to pay that monthly installment, you have to get insurance, you have to pay for parking. So if you're not driving, you're saving $600, $700, $800 a month. And then you can spend that $700 in a club or a bar, right? So there's a value shift and there's a preference shift. And driving is part of that game. Because you have only so much money you can spend on these little things. And you do not have children. Okay? If you do not have kids, you really don't need car that much because you don't have to take them to school, you don't have to take them to football practice, you don't have to take them to piano lessons. I know all this because I have young children and so I do all this. Without a car I cannot do all this, right? But if I don't have kids, I can think of living without a car because I don't need to drive them. Yes.
But given a city, an Indian city like Delhi or Hyderabad or a larger city like Mumbai or Bangalore, I would still feel that traffic is something people would avoid and choose a location for residence
so that's possible.
nearer to workplace.
That's possible. I'm talking about Canadian and American context, but in Indian context, that's certainly possible because traffic is really bad.
But once you have very good public transport system, like metro and things like that, then still people can go back and live in the outskirts because affordability is another issue because you cannot hold an apartment in the city center where you have within 5 minutes if you got every 3 minutes you get a metro connectivity, like as we see in developed countries. Right. If you have that, then still in India I don't know how far the shift is.
Okay, so I'm trying to respond to that. So that is true. If you have public transportation that is connecting people to suburbs, some people may start living in suburbs. The issue with suburbs is that they are low density and they are purely residential. The way Canadian suburbs and the way American suburbs are built, it's only houses. And then you will have, in one part, you will have a large shopping complex where you will have huge stores, Walmart and stuff, right? And they'll have parking for 600 cars, 1,000 cars outside. Huge, big box retail. And I have lecture on that, so you can see pictures and all of that. The kind of lifestyle that the young people want is not available in the suburb, right? So you may be able to take public transport to get to your suburban house, but you will not be able to walk to a bar. You will not be able to walk to a cafe, right? You cannot just find a Starbucks where you can sit with your laptop for 4 hours over a cup of coffee, right? So the kind of yuppie lifestyle Generation Y prefers is not found in the suburbs. You need sort of high density building for that. So that's kind of different. So she and then you. Okay. I'm just going in the order.
So my point was related.
You have to switch on that, please.
So my point was related to him because I think in India the reality goes opposite way because right now our generation cannot afford to live in the city center and there is hardly any space for that matter. So Delhi is expanding like anything. So now we have NCR, we have Ghaziabad, Noida, Gurgaon, and there it's actually in the suburbs where people can actually afford to stay. And it's not that probably the generation does not want houses with big backyards, but we can't preferably afford such housing. And second thing is I think now as you said that the builders are already so smart that for example we have Gurgaon and we have that whole area in Gurgaon where you have pubs and everything. So now they are developing it in every area. Probably earlier in Delhi we had it in CP or maybe in South Delhi, but such complex cafes, disc, pubs, they are developing everywhere. So I think they are going pretty smart with the fact that you have no option but to live in suburbs, so they will give you that kind of lifestyle within those areas.
Good. So there is some similarity and some differences in Indian cities, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I would like to talk about when we say preferences. I feel that we are excluding the section of the society, especially in the context of India, who do not have to they can't prefer or they don't have much choice to live near to their workplace and all. I'm working on the housing among the lower economic section. So what I have seen is they don't have the choice, they don't have the affordability to live near workplace, so they travel public transportation. And the thing you said about the affordability, that we still want big yards and everything. So I guess in city centers, we have seen this trend where people are renting the housing, keeping the flats on leash rather than purchasing the house. So that is a trend that is emerging in Indian city centers, where we have big houses in some other cities, second tier or third tier cities, whereas in the mega cities we prefer more of a housing where we get the flexibility and mobility choice and everything. So
right.
What
So
I would
no.
like to add to her point is, she said that it's only about the affordability and people do not want to, people want to stay in a larger place and in the suburban areas, but they cannot afford. I think even if they can afford, they would like to live in the city center on a bigger apartments. They can afford bigger apartments, and then amenities are available. Like, why would you like to shift to a suburban area and not shift to a bigger apartment in the city center where you have different amenities and common parking facility? Because you will have to look after your own garage, but there will be somebody to look after the garage and the amenities. You have everything there. So I think Generation Y is trending towards that, choices, preferences.
Right. So all good points. Right. All good points. So I said preference. So that's different from affordability a little bit. Right. So you prefer to do this. If you had the money, you would do this. So when I say, that Generation Y has a preference for downtown living, that means that on the whole, the generation would like to live downtown. That does not mean that everybody lives downtown. Right? So there are people who do not live, and I don't know if I'll get time to do it in this lecture today. But perhaps I'll repeat this whole lecture. Right? So I talked about how they are living with their parents or doubling up and all those things. But there is a preference. So moving on, so social activism, already told, much more social activism, taking, participating in issues, right? So, our parents were very, very conservative. So, the young folk these days take up causes, right? So, they may do it over social media, they may join protest march, this, that, and the other, right? And bigger cities definitely more than smaller cities. In general, the generation is very IT savvy. The first generation to be born when internet was easily available all around, and so they've grown up with technology, right? Which means that they have different kinds of employment needs, right? So they have different kinds of skill sets, they have different kinds of employment needs. A lot of work done, most of the work done in US and Canada now requires advanced skills because there is no manufacturing left, very little. So all manufacturing, like making shirts or anything, making tables, chairs, computers, all that is done in Asia or countries where labor is cheap. So they do not produce anything there, they do not manufacture anything there, everything is imported from other countries. So there are lots of jobs available in information technology sector or financial services sector or logistics and transportation, but there are not many jobs available in manufacturing, which means that you have to give yourselves a lot of skills training in these technology jobs to be able to get a high paying job. Right? So a big difference between Generation Y and Generation X is in while Generation X could, not go to college and still be able to get good salary and good income because they can get job in a factory or they can get job as a tradesman somewhere. And those kinds of jobs are gone from both the US and Canada, right? So there are different kinds of employment needs now. And there's a mismatch between kind of skills people need and the kind of skills society has. Right? And so if you read newspapers and all this Trump talk about, make America great again and bring jobs back, it's all trash because manufacturing is gone. And all those people who used to work manufacturing jobs are without employment now. So nobody's going to put another factory back in the US. Labor costs in Asia are probably hundreds of what it is in Asia. Again, last point, and we've talked about this quite enough, recreational needs, right? So different kinds of recreational needs, so more higher affinity for organic food, for example, or pubs or bars, or social. So all that has changed for generation 1. Okay? And that has profound implications for how we plan our cities and what kind of things we provide in our cities. This generation is sort of unfortunate because as it was getting into adulthood and as it was becoming working age, the US and the entire globe, for that matter, was hit by the deepest economic recession, right? So 2008, 2009, 2010. And employment levels are only now in 2017 back up to where they were in 2007. Right? So very high unemployment for a very long period of time, not seen in almost 80 years in US and Canada, right? Since the Great Depression. And so if you look at this caption here, I can't even get a job waitressing, right? Generation Y, and it's from Globe and Mail, which is the largest newspaper in Canada. Okay, so I'll move on. So perhaps in a few time we can do a detailed discussion about generation. A break later.
Yeah, you can.
I can actually use a short 3-minute break myself, and I would request you all just get out of here, stretch a bit. If you want to go to the bathroom, do that quickly and come back. Let's take a short 3-minute break. I need a break.
But 3 minutes is 3 minutes.
Yes, Canadian 3 minutes, not Indian 3 minutes. After 3 minutes. Let everybody.
Actually, I agree.
I should go a little faster.
Because this is important. Most of the time.
Do we get the slides or print of slides on there?
Yeah, I think there will be some written material also, but maybe you will have to access
The same slides, content is okay or whatever we
No,
ये वो थोड़ा विंडो खोलो पीछे से वो बहुत गर्म हो गया है so you can at least open it for some time. Sorry आप क्या उठ जाओ यार खोल दो लड़की टेले कर रही है दो खोल दो थोड़ा सब You move there. There is a chair there. You sit over हमारे लैपटॉप स्ट्रीम हो जाएगी वाईफाई से फोन लैब नहीं करेगा क्योंकि मैंने उसको अभी SD में डाउनलोड करने की कोशिश की. Let me try. अगर SD नहीं चलेगी तो then you run it on Vimeo. Vimeo भी फ्री में मिल रही है. I just spent $10 to show that.
India.
Everything is cracked.
I don't do that. You should pay for it.
Don't forget your role. बीच में एक दो लगा लेना.
Put a curtain, just leave the door open and pull curtain so that that's so once everybody is here, then you can. Okay, let's start again. So your name? Sorry, guys.
Like the previous slide, there was social preferences. So I think there is a lot of individualization nowadays. So people might be living with the, apart from the parents, the same city, and connecting with them with the virtual space. They are more global than local than why, and they have this community living thing, the attitudinal shift. So global living is there, but there is some emotional or physical distance from the families. More of nuclearization.
Yeah, definitely. And we are seeing more and more of that everywhere.
I have a question.
Yes, please.
Actually,
this is what you're talking about. Because there's a part.
You talked about the percentage of the driving license is decreasing. What my question is that if the people are living the suburb and the connectivity between the core and the periphery and the suburbs, how do we say the suburbs? In the core area, the transportation system is very good, the public transportation. But if we want to connect the suburbs and the core, then the connectivity is not that good. What we have in the core area. Okay. So in that perspective, I don't understand why the percentage of driving license is decreasing over the decade. Yeah.
Decreasing.
Yes, yes.
So
in this generation.
Right. So
because we need the car
okay,
to connect.
I'm trying to explain it. You have to hear me out. So it's a preference shift. Okay. So you can, if you can get through your day without driving, you prefer to do that. You prefer to do that. So your parents live in suburbs. You grew up in a suburb, but now you start living in the core. And in core, you really don't need a car because there is very good bus system. There is, streetcar or tram or metro or whatever. There is public transportation to the suburbs. It's not that great. Okay. But you don't have to travel to suburb every day. You may not even have to travel to suburb every weekend. Right? If you, like he said, if you don't have to physically meet with your parents very often, then once in a while it's okay. You can sit in a bus for 1 hour, 1.5 hours, 2 hours. Whereas driving would have taken you 35-40 minutes. It's taking 1.5 hours. But you're doing it only once or twice a month, so it's okay. But you are satisfying your preference. So that's what's happening. We are also finding that these Generation Y folks, as they are getting older, so when they reach age of 30-31, their travel behavior is converging with their parents, right? So they're getting cars, they're getting licenses, they're not getting licenses at the age of 16. They're getting it when they turn 25 or 26 or 24 or 23. They're not buying a car when they are 20 or 21, they are buying a car when they are 27 or 28. So there is that kind of preference shift in something. Okay. But I can do that, my lecture on millennials travel behavior, in following few days again, because I see there is a lot of interest about that. Okay. Okay, let's talk about household composition, and that has a profound effect on cities and planning and everything. Okay. So in general, average household size has declined. Right? So average number of people living together in the same house has declined. Okay. So a typical American family in the 60s used to be husband, wife, 2 kids, and a dog. Okay, 5-member household. That has shrunk. That has shrunk substantially. Okay. If you look at all these numbers, right, these are all sort of wealthy Western nations. Almost a third, almost a little bit more than a quarter, single person household. So you are living by yourself. Right? So 4 human beings versus 1. Right? Substantial drop on average household size. Okay. So that's one big difference. And it has effects for everything, because I mean, one, you need a lot more housing units, right? So if everybody starts living by themselves, you have to build a lot more sort of houses, a lot more flats. Then if the entire family shared 1 car, now you need 4 cars, because these 4 are living separate. Your expenditure on groceries, your consumption of energy, everything goes up, because you're just living by yourself. You still need something to heat your water, something to cool down your flat, something to warm it up, and all of these. Energy use goes up overall as a society. Okay? So profound implications. Along with this, back in the 60s and 50s, not a whole lot of women worked for work. Okay, so a lot of them were housewives, so they were kind of working as a volunteer in a library or whatever kind of social service. Now, 70% of women in Canada work for money, right? All kinds of jobs. So that sort of gap, gender gap in the workforce has shrunk substantially, and that has impacted cities a whole lot. Because remember, these cities were built around the car, so to get to work you have to drive. So until the 60s, a woman may not even have a driving license ever in life, because she's not going to work. You are still married, you live with a family, so men drive. A lot of Indian families are still like that, right? So men have driving license, they are the ones who drive, and women stay at home doing small things. US, Canada like that in the 60s, and that has changed.
I'm different. I don't have a driving license.
Yeah. GNU folks are any different. So double worker family, right? So both men and women in the house of work. Okay. So it changes the way people travel through the city, and it changes the way family or that household lives, because now you have 2 incomes coming in. So the household income goes up, so your overall consumption goes up. You start demanding more buy goods, more consumer goods, because your family as a whole is earning maybe not twice or maybe 1.6 times than a single worker family. So that's that. Okay. And the last bullet is just about those. Okay. And so this sort of shows you Canadian data, how the average household size has been sort of declining, and it's shrunk a whole lot. Okay. Okay. Again, you can see the bottom gray is single person household, and that's increasing, right? And these large families, 5 persons, they are decreasing. And then there are people come. So this 1 person household has become sort of really, really big, and that trend is being forecast, in the future. That it will continue to increase. This trend of 1 person household, people living by themselves until much, much later in life, is sort of going forward very, very strongly. Okay.
How do you define a household in Canada?
Household is a housing unit. So 1 house. one flat, one house, one condominium. That's
So,
household.
like for instance, there is a census definition for household in India. In a similar way, how is a household defined in Canada?
Housing unit. Housing unit. So any residential unit, one, that's household. So 1% household means one person living in one housing unit. 2% household will mean two persons living in one housing unit. So household is housing unit. Very simply, housing unit. Same address, same housing unit. Okay, let's talk about immigration. Okay. That's a big one. It creates both a lot of challenges and a lot of opportunities. Okay. So first of all, I mean, it creates a lot of diversity, right? So Americans are probably more diverse than Canadians because there are many more immigrants in the US than Canadians. When I went to the US to study for the first time, my class had students from perhaps 15 or 16 different countries, and none of them were going back, right? So there were students from India, there were students from China, Japan, Taiwan, all over the world, right? Brazil, can't even remember where else. But we had students from all over, and we all were to be first generation immigrants in the US. Diverse community. I started realizing different kinds of foods, right? And different kind of habits, different kind of culture, different kind of norms in different societies. So very diverse community. Right? Diversity in community comes from immigration. So Delhi is much more diverse than my hometown. My hometown is a small town in UP. Everybody there is from UP, except maybe those who work in the Indian Army. Right? And so you can see when you go through cantonment, you find people talking language other than UP, okay? Which otherwise, so diversity, big opportunity. It brings a lot of economic resilience, right? So like I said earlier that Canada is not as young. Canada is not as young as the US. That's because of less immigration. Right? So all of us, we were a class of about 42 students. Out of 42, I think 20 or 22 were from not the US but from other countries, and we all stayed on. Right? We all were very young when we went there. And we contributed so much to the economy because we were young workers, trained in a US college, working for the US. Right? I became a university professor. Some must have gone and worked for different municipalities. Some must have gone and worked for the community. So we have created a lot of productivity. We have contributed to the GDP of US and now in Canada through this kind of process of immigration. So it brings a lot of economic resilience to these countries, whose population otherwise is aging and people are retiring, right? So we are bringing young workforce. So that's an opportunity. The challenge is it also brings a lot of economic insecurity, right? And so I have slides on this, but that's very common. People think that these immigrants come in and take our jobs away. Okay? And so it's felt a whole lot in America now, and Trump won his election based on this platform that these Indian and Chinese immigrants, they come and they take all these highly paying jobs and they live in big houses and they drive big cars, and you are poor because of these immigrants. Right? He did not tell anyone that you are poor because you do not have skills, you did not go to college, you did not learn how to run a computer. He's telling it's because of immigrants. So it creates this sense of economic insecurity among domestic workers. And foreign culture. Like I said, you go in, you bring foreign culture. And that foreign culture could be both a challenge and an opportunity. It could make people very happy about something like that, or it could make people very uneasy about that, right? So for example, samosa is a very popular food in Canada, right? So Punjabis have been immigrating to Canada for a very long time, and samosa has become a part of Canadian food. You go to any superstore and you will find boxes of frozen samosas that you can bring home, heat it in oven, and eat it. Right? So that's a big contribution. There is a lot of uproar about women covering their head. Right? Women covering their head. That's not part of Canadian culture. And a lot of people feel not so good about this. Right? Why should this happen? So foreign culture again brings both challenges and opportunities. Different values and aspirations. Immigrants tend to value a whole lot on college education. They want their children to study. They want their children to work hard in school. They think that playing football is a waste of time. Playing hockey is a waste of time. You should study hard. You should get scholarship. You should all study at Harvard, MIT, and Yale. You should all marry early and get 10 children. And so typical immigrant mentality. You want your children to be to not struggle as much as you had to do as first generation. Different values. Immigrants tend to not participate in the whole democratic process a whole lot. Right? So we tend to shy away from participating in protests as immigrants. You don't want to come across as somebody who's a troublemaker. You want to kind of lie low. Not. These values are very different from traditional Canadian values. If somebody is not doing something right, you stand up and protest. The state protects you against any physical harm by anybody else. So I can say anything to you, right? As long as I'm within my limits, I have the right that you listen to me. Okay? You cannot just come back and start beating me or shoot me or something. Right? I'm protected by the law. I can walk up to the MP of my city and tell him in his face that the policy you are supporting is wrong. Okay? He has to listen to me. He's a public servant. I am protected by the law that MP cannot do anything against me. Not quite the same in India. We tend to fear politicians a whole lot. But that's that. But immigrants don't want to do that. And so a lot of Canadians think that these immigrants are weakening their democracy or democratic process of the country. And as anecdote, I've experienced it myself. So there was something going on at the end of our street, and the whole street, people who live on my street, they wanted to go and write a letter to the mayor and protest against whatever. And I listened, it will be a waste of time. We'll go, we'll spend 4 hours sitting in the mayor's office and this, that. So I said, I'll help you, I'll write up this letter, I'll draw some pictures and all of that. I didn't go to the meeting because I would rather stay at home and watch TV than do this protest. And it's a sort of a different value statement than Canadian values. Some may not like it. Right? So there is that. And I don't know if I have more slides on that later on, but different values. So it creates both, challenges and some opportunities. This is very important, and perhaps you can speak more about this than accommodation versus integration. You accommodate an immigrant versus you integrate an immigrant. So I have a slide later, but perhaps you can talk a little bit about it.
Later.
Yeah, 1 or 2 slides later. Then fear mongering. So again, I said, Trump won his entire election on zero economic platform just by fear mongering. And that's just not the US, it's everywhere. It's everywhere. Fear mongering against certain countries, against certain religions, right? All of this. So, big challenge. And then, of course, all of this creates social tension. Right? All of this creates social tension. And a big challenge in present cities, global world. Right. So this slide just shows you, the amount of diversity that we have in Canada right now. Extremely diverse. Almost 22% Canadian population foreign born, and it's much larger in the US, but 22% foreign born in Canada. Out of that, almost half is from Asia, and I don't have that number here, but a large part of that half actually goes from just India and China. Right? So those two biggest sort of people exporter countries. Okay. Now 12 lakh new immigrants settled in Canada may not sound a big number to you, but the country's population is 3.5 crores. Right? So it's a big number, 3.5 crores. Okay. Again, cities and immigrants. So half of all immigrants in just 3 gateway cities: Montreal, Toronto, and Vancouver. Right? And I've traveled to all the 3 cities, and I've traveled to several other Canadian cities, and the cities feel so different. Right? City feels so different because of this large presence of immigrants. Right? So you can see boards, people selling kebabs and doner kebabs, those who are from Middle East, and Indian food and Pakistani food and dresses and salwar suits and things, so very, very different. You're walking on the street, you come across people from so many different countries, so many different languages. If you go to some of the interior cities that are smaller, you'll not find that. If you go into a public library in any of these cities, to some extent in my city also, because there is some Indian presence, you will find books in Hindi, books in Bengali, Indian movies, Bollywood movies. You'll find all that. So it's kind of multicultural society because of immigration. And then again, 2 in 5 Canadian children are first or second generation immigrants, right? Because immigrants want to have kids and they want to have. So lots of immigration. Like I said earlier, immigrants bring a lot of economic resilience to the country they immigrate to. So Canada has this point system for immigration. So your application form, you write everything about, your age, your gender, your education, are you married, do you have children, do you have work, all those things. And based on that you get a score. And you need 67 right now to be accepted. And that's basically how much are you able to contribute to the economy, how much you will be able to contribute to the country's GDP, and how much you will be able to contribute to the country's population. Because without immigrants, Canadian population is declining. Right? It's declining. People are getting older, young people are not having children, declining. So you need immigrants to keep the population up. So based on that. Again, support given to large immigrant families. So every child you have, if you are below a certain income level, you get some support from the government. I think everybody gets about $67 a month, irrespective of whether you make $1 million a year or 10,000. But if you're poor, you get more, just so that you are able to feed that child well and things like that. But people are given incentives to sort of have more children, and then because these children will grow up and then contribute to the economy. Now the problem is, and this is sort of the Canadian way of looking at things, that while the country is attracting a lot of immigrants, especially since immigration to Canada is much easier than immigration to the US, a lot of highly skilled workers get into the country as a skilled worker, but then they are not able to find a job that's at par with their skill set. Just to give you an example, some anecdotes. So I have met several families in Toronto who have gone from India after having worked here in the banking sector. So they might have been, assistant branch manager or something. So they were working here as banking sector, and they go there and they're not able to find a job in a bank anymore. There's just no job for a brown immigrant who does not have education in Canada in banking sector or whatever. So they are forced to work things like cashiers in stores, right, or accounts in stores, and those are not highly paid jobs. They are sort of minimum wages jobs. They may have a good quality of life, but their level of skill is not being used 100%. there was a news story about all these highly qualified doctors from Mexico and South America who immigrate to both US and Canada and then end up as working as medical assistants because they do not have the license to work as a doctor in Canada. Getting a license, you require lots of tests, medical licensing exams, and then you have to put yourselves through some training again. And so you may end up working as a medical assistant for 6, 7, 8 years until you get your license. Now that's a waste of their medical education experience. Another anecdote. So I met one of my classmates in PhD was from Bombay, and her husband was a surgeon at Tata Memorial Cancer Hospital. So highly qualified, not just surgery but oncology after that. And he had good 3-4 years of experience. So his wife started studying. He of course didn't come, but maybe 2 or 3 years later she convinced him to come as well. So he very reluctantly came to the US, for 2 or 3 months, and then decided that he will write a licensing exam. So he wrote and he failed because he did not study. He just wanted to come back and he wanted to bring his wife back, but wife did not want to go back because the kind of independence and liberation as a woman that you get in US, you don't want to come back. Anyway, then finally he wrote his exam. It took him 1.5 years to pass because he had to study some of the basics, and he used to we would have a few drinks and then he will just bullshit everything US and then say, see, they are making me write this exam on anatomy and I do surgeries, and he was a specialist of head neck cancer. So I'm such a highly qualified specialist and they're asking me about how many bones are there in the body. I'm making this up, but something kind of to that level. So he wrote that, so that took to about 2 years. Then he had to do a 3-year fellowship in cancer surgery before he could actually get a placement. And when he went there, he was asked to, for a month, perform appendectomy, surgeries of appendix. And he said, when I was studying surgery in some Bombay hospital, we used to do appendectomies, cutting appendices, on the side. So we'll do a surgery, and there used to be 15-20 minutes time between the second surgery. And rather than wasting that time, because it was a government hospital, we'll just go change our gloves, do an appendix operation, and then go to the next operation theater where we have to now work on a next cancer patient. So he said, that is my level of expertise. I can probably do 200 appendix surgeries with my eyes closed. And for a month, they made me do just that. Right? So not using immigrant skills to 100% level. Right? So there's that. And now he's very happy. He's in Chicago, he's a cancer surgeon, his salary is about $600,000, so very well off. Okay. So that's one part. But in any case, he's a cancer surgeon in the US now. That's a big contribution to the US economy. Right? So all the money the government of India spent on training him is being used in the US. At the same time, it also creates a big perception of job insecurity among domestic workers. And you just look at all these headlines, right? Donald Trump, again from the US, again from the US, right? The big sort of perception created by politicians that these immigrant workers are taking away your jobs. You are poor because of immigrants. You do not have work because of immigrants. Okay? And that creates a lot of social tension. I'll share this PowerPoint with whosoever wants, and all the references for everything that I'm saying, that's at the bottom of the slides, right? Everything is not my research. I'm borrowing from a lot of sources, so there are citations. It's just unfortunate that you're not able to see everything on this screen. Okay. Foreign culture. So, Chinese immigrants have perhaps been among the first immigrants to arrive in both the US and Canada. Among the first immigrants, they were brought in as construction workers to work on rail line projects. more than 100 years back. And so it's very common to find Chinatowns in almost every major American and Canadian city. Right? This is in Toronto, Dundas Street, and you can see, Chinese put up front. This projector is not very high. Maybe can we turn down these guys so that we can get this? Yeah, but if you look carefully, you'll find not just Chinese boards, but others as well. I can see it on my screen, but there's a doner kebab somewhere over there. So anyway, besides the point, it's not waste time on this. But a lot of foreign culture, right? And it's not just food, but it's also groceries, right? So you can get mangoes from India in Canada, Alfonso's and everything. You can get mangoes from Manila, you can get mangoes from Philippines, you can get mangoes from different countries in South America. And people from each country love eating mangoes from their own country, right? I never tasted a mango from Mexico until I went there, and I did not like it at all when I ate it. But now I like it because it's the cheapest mango I get, and there's only so many $3 Alfonsos that I can afford to eat, and I want to eat mangoes. You can get lychees from different countries, right? So a lot of these crops are grown locally. So a lot of Punjabis have huge farms where they grow bhindis, So there is a Chinese bhindi which is kind of thick, and the Indian bhindi like you get here. Same with saag, right? So mustard leaves. So different countries, different medicines, right? So you can get Chinese alternative medicine. You can get Chinese clothes. You can get Indian clothes. Chinese New Year is in February sometime. It's celebrated every year. Almost all TV channels will run special programs for Chinese New Year. It's a big deal. Stores will offer discounts, right? Same goes for Diwali, right? So largest immigrant groups. So Diwali stores will have special offers. You can get Haldiram sweets in all major stores. Like they have a small stand where they'll be selling sweets. So, and a lot of Canadians or Canadian-born people, they have started sort of participating in these foreign cultures. Right? So it's not that Chinese New Year will be celebrated only by the Chinese. Like Canadians will celebrate it as much because it just gives you an opportunity to go out and celebrate, have fun. Same goes for Diwali. Right? Same goes for other cultural festivals. So a lot of those things. So, and it creates a lot of economic opportunities in societies, right? So that's it. Okay. Different values and aspirations. Right? And this is kind of highly contentious, highly debatable, highly contentious topic, right? So I said this point earlier already, right? So visible minority, right? So Indians and Asians and immigrants, they have much higher expectations from their children to study hard, right? So it's same in India, it's same in China, and it remains same when you go to Canada or the US as first generation. Right? You place a lot of value and you place a lot of time and effort on your child's education, much more than Canadian, right? So a Canadian parent would encourage child to learn ice hockey and participate in sports and take them camping. And Indian parents would think, these are all kind of waste of time. So rather than play hockey, do a math tuition somewhere. So that's the kind of mindset. That's one. But other than that, there's a lot of sort of cultural difference, value difference between immigrants and kind of local citizens. Religion and faith, and it has become really, really big in the last 15 to 20 years, ever since 9/11 attack on the World Trade Centers, against at least part of society. For example, people know that Diwali is a festival of lights, and it's a biggest Hindu festival, and it's celebrated by putting diyas outside and then you do firecrackers, right? So there are some cities where this is accepted. Right? So city has ordinance where on the day of Diwali you can actually go outside and light firecrackers. There are some cities which ban the use of firecrackers. Because one, it's noisy. Second, it's a fire hazard. And if a lot of people start doing this, your neighbors might start complaining. Right? Your white neighbors might start complaining. So there are some cities where it's embraced. There are some cities where it's systematically shut down. Right? So it's kind of religion and faith based. Okay. Hard work could mean so many things to different people. Different people could associate hard work with different, right? So I'll just leave it at that. Women's right is a big thing. It's a big thing, right? And so it's kind of a light anecdote, but you could actually file for a divorce as a woman if your partner brings in guests for dinner without telling you in advance. And it could be considered a valid reason that you know. Okay? So women's rights, very great. Me Too and the movement, everybody knows about that, right? That's kind of the latest example of an organized fight for women's rights. So, modesty, covering your body when you are in public, modesty, very different norms. Different cultures have different norms. So, in some cultures, you cannot go out without covering every part of your skin. In some cultures, it's okay to go out wearing shorts, both men and women. In some cultures, it's okay for men to wear shorts, but not for women, so on and so forth. Right? So modesty, again, differs a whole lot, not just country to country, but different parts of country also. So all of it, family planning, marriage and courtship, different cultures, right? So I don't think it's legally and for tax purposes acceptable in India, but in Canada, a common law partner is a valid tax line item. Right? So you can file you and your partner taxes together even if you're not married, common law partner. So that's changed. So that's different. Okay? And so in some cultures it may be completely unacceptable. In some cultures it may be partially acceptable. And in Canadian culture it is 100%. 100%. So maybe you can talk a little bit about this now. I can take a break.
I think just to little bit of North American experience which I have with respect to city and multiculturalism, I think there is something in the context of accommodation and integration. Previously, what was discussed, what was the major discourse in US cities was about melting pot. Today they talk about salad bowl. One of the and that is very interesting part of this multiculturalism debate. There are a large number of articles and books. You see, when you talk about melting pot, you basically try to integrate people and they lose their identity. Either you may be called a hybrid or maybe some new form of cultural entity in all this. But in the context of the salad bowl discourse, what you tend to, and that's very important because in the cities are also being looked at from a very perspective of identities. The fact he talked about different cultures, they have preserved their way of building, the way of eating, way of dressing. I think the cities now tend to realize and understand that identities are very important. So in a salad bowl discourse, you give what is a salad bowl. You have a cucumber and a grape coexisting together. It tastes good. You can put in a little bit of cheese, which can add some flavor. So therefore, this is one aspect I think which is becoming very, very important. This is also very important in the context of what you talked about. Cities are about resolving conflicts. And if you tend to make cities like a melting pot, the resistance is pretty high. In a situation like where you talk about the salad bowl, you tend to retain your identity, the conflict tends to be much less. You see? So this is, I think, in the context, and especially when you are talking about large number of immigrants going to cities, that becomes very important. Now, just to talk in the context of India, and of course India is already multicultural, the diversity is high. But when you are talking about multiculturalism in the context of the West, I think the diversity is not within the nation, it is from outside. So therefore the people tendency to resist is much more higher. Okay, so this is what I would right now say in the context of this multiculturalism. It's very, very interesting perspective in urban planning. How do you, and what he was talking about, I think it is also happening in the context of India. You see, I think diversity brings, makes cities much more livable. If you must have seen some of the livability index or the cities which UN Habitat also does. Interestingly, Montreal ranks very high. And if you study Montreal, it is a very interesting city. Of course, it's one part is a French speaking, another is a English speaking, and they fight amongst each other. But and that is also one of the cities which I have seen, the first city where the gays and the lesbians were recognized to live in a particular neighborhood, right? Which was one of the first cities to do so, right? So therefore, I think in the context of multicultural, I think it is not only about different communities, different migrants, it is also about different ways of living. I think that is very, very important for us to understand. I think cities are, and especially in the context of what he said in the beginning, he made a very interesting, and this is very, very important because the structure of the city, like what he talked about the new generation is that they would like to live in a city center. And in fact, the issue of multiculturalism is very, very important in the context of young people. You see, I think the diversity gives them richness, and therefore the city center, as it becomes very, very diverse, it becomes much more livable. It is in this context you must have read Jane Jacobs' famous theory of new urbanism. I don't know whether you have read it, you should read. Jane Jacobs was not a planner, he was basically a journalist, okay, trying to understand, the New York City. And she talked about, how diversity, density matters. And when she wrote the book about the death of the American cities, she was basically referring to, if you enhance diversity, if you enhance multiculturalism, the cities become much more livable and much more sustainable in whatever way one can talk about. So I think these are the issues. But having said that, how do you internalize this in planning process? I think that is the challenge. If you talk about the housing societies, even now in many of the American Canadian cities, there are still, like, just like there is a Chinese Chinatown, like, in Chicago there is a, very Indian, street, and of course many of the streets goes through transformation. First it was a Jewish street, then maybe the Jews earned more money, they went back to some other place, then the Indians came in, and now the Bangladeshis are coming. Okay, so these type of tremendous type of changes that is taking place with respect to culture, diversity is a very interesting thing. Therefore, as far as the planning is concerned, today planning has moved away from being, especially in the context of this, planning is just moved away from being very physical. It is talking not about land use and build forms, it is also, this addressing the issues of diversity in terms of people's way of living and addressing, but still a challenge in terms of planning process. Yeah.
So I will give you some. Sorry, can someone please open a door a little bit? It's getting very suffocating. Just for 5 minutes. Thank you. Okay, so it's planets can actually play a role, and they do play a role in addressing some of the challenges of multiculturalism. How do you accommodate, rather than integrate, how do you accommodate? And how do you create space for people from different cultures and foreign cultures? So in the city that I live in Kingston, Canada, and a lot of Canadian cities have this. So there is this organization, I'm blanking on the full form, but they are meant to help first generation immigrants settle down in your city. So if you come to Kingston as a first generation immigrant, you simply give them a call or write an email or send them a letter, and then they will contact you. They will give you a welcome kit, which will consist of grocery stores. They will list, if you need ethnic food, so if you need Bangladeshi spices, if you need Korean spices, and which stores sell which things. They will list some major pharmacies, major doctors, and all of those things. A lot of information which you need to settle down in a city. Right? So they will do that. They will help you find school for your child, what grade he goes in. And then somebody will come and give you an orientation. That for example, in India we call it a chemist, but in Canada we call it a pharmacy. So until you know that, how will you go and buy medicine? You have to know what it's called. And for some of us it's very easy because we are on the internet and we can look it up or read a book. But there may be immigrants, or there may be people from a culture who do not know how to use the internet, right? Or who do not know how to read in English. So for them, these sort of agencies, right? And I consider this to be a part of planning process in the city. These agencies do that. Then once a year they will organize a festival of multiculturalism. Now, the city I live in is very small, it's only 120,000 people. So that multicultural festival is only one day. So there is a big public square in the city. And it's important that the city has that kind of space in which to organize this festival. And different communities from different countries usually have their associations. So there's an Indian association, a Pakistani association, Iraq association, whatever. Right? So each agency or each association will be given some free space, like a stall in a Diwali Mela. And you can use it for whatever. You can use it to put up a screen and play some movies or documentaries about your country. You can sell food from your country. You can sell clothes from your country. You can do some art. So do whatever. So that is responsibility of association, how they want to present their culture. Okay. Then there is a stage on which your children can perform, or your that association can perform, and each country will get a 10-minute slot or a 15-minute slot, and you could present a play or a drama or a dance or anything. And Indians get 30 minutes because a dance troupe, what's that? Shamak Davar. So Shamak Davar troupe from Toronto comes to play at that, and they will do the latest dance moves in Bollywood, and they do like a 10-minute training. So they will tell you 2 or 3 moves, and all the Indians are just sitting, not doing anything, and it's all the Canadians who are trying to learn those dance moves, right? But it's a way to sort of accommodate different cultures, and providing a platform, a space where all different cultures can come together and present highlights. Right? So I know a lot more about people from different countries than I did before I went to the US. Not even the US, before I went to Canada. US was more like a melting pot. Okay, so multicultural. So this is the last slide on multicultural immigration, and we'll take a break after this. A lot of fear mongering. And it's common, it's become so widespread now. US, because of Donald Trump, and it's it's covered in media all over. Right? Fear mongering against certain communities, against certain countries, against certain faiths and religions. It's in a lot of places in Europe. So I went to Copenhagen last year, and I was going from Copenhagen to Malmö in Sweden. It's a border town, and I have not received such strong stares for a very long time. So when you're a brown person sitting in a bus from really small town white people, everybody is looking at you. He looks different. Who is he? Is he a terrorist? He looks different, right? Strong. And you can tell that, those looks are not friendly looks, right? So fear mongering, telling people that be scared of these kinds of people. So that's going on. And Canadians consider themselves to be very multicultural, very open to people from all over the world. But this is kind of creeping in Canada as well, right? So there are kind of hate crimes against certain religions and against certain people, right? So that's there. And then this creates a lot of social tension. So I'll give you two sort of counter examples. So some Indians wanted to start a temple in Kingston. So you have to get a permit for a religious building and all of that, and all that is in place. And so got a permit. And now we were looking for a small property, like a small house where we can start this temple, which is not very expensive. Everybody has to donate money, it's a small community. And the city actually helped us. So when I say city, I mean municipality. So municipality is called City Hall in Canada. So the city helped us identify some properties that are affordable and all of that. So the government did its part for it. Right? But when these people went and looked over at the building, so they suggested that we lease that building for 1 year rather than buy and see if it will work. And then the notion we got, in a few months was that those neighbors really didn't like this. Right? Because, we will do once a month, we will do like a bhajan evening or something, and potluck dinner, and we bring in all the kids, and, everybody will wear Indian outfits, lots of cars, right? So neighborhood has all this traffic, and we are doing music, which is kind of not their music. And so we started getting, this notion that people don't like this. Like there was no damage to property, there was no vandalism, but we didn't feel comfortable, and that property was abandoned. Right? So social tension because of fear mongering by certain parts of the society against brown people. These people don't know which religion this is and what are they doing. So they could either come and talk to us and learn about the religion, and that would be more sort of salad bowl, but social change. So both opportunities and challenges. Okay, I think let's take a break here. It's been another 40. Let's take a break here. 5-minute break, not longer than 5, and then we'll talk about income disparities. Okay, feel free to walk around, stretch a little.
Kind of
whether what time they are getting the lunch.
Lunch, okay.
This is the application.
We still have to look in the numbers.
कितना आया अभी? Total. So Ajay, I think the number is around 32. So 32. But including then it will be 36. So if everybody goes to the field, it is still. Okay, no, they can take more. Another session will go for 30 minutes. That's okay.
Okay.
क्या बोल रहे थे?
नहीं मैं बोल रहा था actually around 36 people are there. If everybody goes to the field, then anyway they will have two groups.
वो आप मुझको बताना मैं उसको शाम को कर सकता हूँ email that woman no उसको फॉर्म देना है
There's some other Jeffrey quality the first one, second, okay. Help. It's a kind of online basic. Then I'll try to associate the relationship, quality of water and this is all study is six slums. Quite different in the south. Yeah. But also carrying.
It has colors. So internet also has colors. It also has both. So both can be applied even to the so how you do that? That's like also yeah. Also the organization has interest. So I have chosen the it's a colonial interest.
By the way, this GNU strike, is it continuing or
yes.
And what about the road blockades?
It's
not. No, this is important. You have to tell me because I don't know. Because you are more connected to the ground reality, I suppose. Because tomorrow morning we are getting the bus. So the point is, where do we get the bus?
T-point.
T-point. That central school.
Yes.
Yeah. Kendriya, the Sabarmati.
Sabarmati bus stop.
Okay. Because we have to tell the bus guy because we will come around 8:30.
Okay. Let's talk about rising income. So in general, Canadians and Americans, in general, society has become a lot more wealthier than it was 100 years back. Individual incomes have increased, people have become richer, and household incomes have increased. Right? And because of women's participation in workforce now, in general, households have become wealthier. This gives rise to rising consumption bills, right? So if your incomes increase, you want to sort of spend more money on consumer goods. You want to buy expensive television, expensive cars, and expensive clothes. You want to accumulate a lot of goods in your house, right? You want a bigger house, so as your income increase, a bigger house. And so we saw that in cities for almost 6 decades. So since World War II, in real terms, after adjusting for inflation, household income steadily went up, and house sizes increased in proportion. Right? People had more money; they wanted to buy a bigger house. Had more money, wanted to buy 2 cars instead of 1 car. Wanted to buy 3 cars instead of 2 cars. So both the husband and the wife will have 1 car each to get to work. Then you have a 3rd car which is for your weekend getaways, right? Nicer car, whatever. So all of this. And that has implications for cities because now you have to build bigger houses, you have to build wider streets, you have to build a lot of parking everywhere, right? So 3 car garages, parking at home, car garage, parking structure at work, near offices, cinema halls, shopping centers, everywhere. Big parking. Okay. That. Also, because people had more money, households had more money, they could spend money on better education. So the way US society or the way Canadian society works is that your high school education, which means up to class 12 before college, that education is free. So almost all, not 100%, but almost all, very, very small percentage of children go to private schools, but everybody goes to public school. Right? That is free. Not everybody passes class 12. A lot of them will fail, but by law you have to, until a certain age, go to the school, and then after that, whether you go to college or not is up to you. College is very expensive. Okay, so you've had free education until class 12, but then college fees, some of you might have applied for a degree in the US or may apply in the future. It's very, very expensive. And then you have to stay in a hostel and buy your own food and all. Very. So, but because people had money now, more money, they could invest more in their education. So, you left education after high school, after class 12, you worked for a few years, you accumulated some money, and then put yourself through college. Generally better. Okay. But with rising incomes also came large income disparities. And I'll go into more details about all of these. Large income disparities. Because builders are building these large houses which were expensive, and nobody was building very cheap small houses, right? So there is such a big affordable housing shortage in the US, and I might have some more numbers later. That's a big, big problem. Big, big problem. And if you just Google, after on images, affordable housing in the US or homelessness in the US, it's a big issue. A lot of people just do not have homes. And to think of that in a wealthy country such as US is kind of a problem. Income disparities also created a lot of social segregation. So the rich folks really don't want to live right in poor folks. That's social segregation.
Can I make a point? Yeah. I think this social segregation. I would also request you to link up some of the issues which he has been discussing and what. See, the multiculturalism issue and social segregation is a very interesting issue. You see, and income. Like maybe you will be able to tell, like, what is the difference in income of different, groups, ethnicities or nationalities in US, and how does it get reflected in space, right? In terms of housing, and therefore it is very interesting. On the one hand, like we have state initiative to promote multiculturalism through skill training, having an exposition and all that type of thing. The other thing is the market dynamics works in a very different way. You see? So therefore, I think this is one issue many of the European and especially North American cities, are going through. These are the issues which we need to understand. Okay, so I was just trying to tell. So yes, you promote multiculturalism, but there are forces which is working, and how does it link up with this issue of segregation? I think that is a point to reflect here.
So let me just see if I have a slide. So I don't have a slide on social segregation later, so let me expand on this now. So like Rishab said, social segregation in the city. I just made a point that everybody goes to public school. Public school meaning government school. Okay. So the way income plays a role in social segregation. The school your child could go to depends on where you live, your residential address. So the way cities are planned, that you build a school, it is surrounded by houses, and the boundary of that school, which means everybody living inside this boundary can send their children to school, is approximately 1.5 to 2 kilometers. And the idea behind that is that's kind of neighborhood planning unit, that your child will be able to walk to school, or you will be able to walk your child to school. You should not have to drive your child to school. So a city will have, hundreds of schools, small schools. Class sizes are small. One teacher can have only 20 students with him or her. So if it's a class of 40 students, then there will be 2 teachers in that class. So that is teacher-student ratio. Now the wealthy will outprice poor people from their school district. Right? So you cannot have in Canadian cities or American cities a house that is $500,000 next to a house that is only $50,000. So there will be difference of maybe 10 to 20%, but not 50% or 60%. So 500,000, 700,000. So roughly people in the same school boundary will have same kind of wealth, if not same kind of dependent. So now you have outpriced people below your income from your neighborhood. So your child will be going to that school with peers that are same income. There is just no way that a poor person will be able to send his or her child to the same school as a wealthy person, because you have to live in that neighborhood. And it's very systematic, right? It's very systematic. You price out the poor, not the schools. Social segregation through sort of housing prices. And there's a lot of research done on this.
Is it mandatory to send your kids to that school?
No, either you send your child there or you send to a private school. This is free. Private school is $1,000 a month.
Education is not free in Canada.
It's free.
Like private schools still do operate.
Yeah.
So what is the rationale of operating? Because one is totally free and quality of education is the difference.
There are people who want to send their child to a private school because the public school still has people making $400,000 a month. And I make $1 million a month. I don't want to send my child to a public school. I don't want my child to be using pen and paper. I want him only to write on iPad. I don't want my child to study in a classroom with 20 students. I want only 8 in a classroom. I want personal education for my child. That's money.
See, there is another interesting thing which happens in some of the US cities, and as you know that the cities, many of the resources depends on the tax base, and you have to understand in the American and other cities, wherever if you don't pay the tax, the asset also goes down. Okay, so, and one of the things that he was talking about, the suburbanization process. In the suburbanization process, what happened? The rich people moved out, the other neighborhoods became poorer, not only because poor people lived, but they could not pay the taxes. And the municipal corporation and the local council, has to fund those resources. How will they get that? Right? So in some ways, many of these processes work, and in fact, interestingly, he was talking about revitalization. I happen to study some of these North American declining cities, and it is very classic case, when people move out, the tax base goes down, and the first thing that hits is the social infrastructure like schools, maybe community building, and slowly that area starts going down. So I think these are very, very, it's a very different type of processes that work, So that is one thing which, and that is one of the reasons, if you look into the educational profile, see of the Indian or the Chinese students and Hispanics. Hispanics overall average income is lower than the Indians and the Chinese. And the Chinese and Indians will be able to send more of their kids to private school than a Hispanic. Right? So these are some of the dynamics which is very, important in terms of, what basically we are talking about is, it is about urban spaces, how the dynamics of urban space, the social and the physical changes, they are related, you see. So, it's very interesting, and those are some of the planning challenges which cities in North America are facing, right? And it is in that context when you was talking about, see, when I was there studying, the developers were not building condominiums in the city center because the housing prices has crashed so much, even the developers were on the red. Okay, but the talk was going on. How do you densify the city center? You know, and it is very interesting that the observation, the things, you know. So these are, I think the reason why I think this particular course has been structured in what we are talking about, the globalization issues and all. And of course, many of you must be thinking that why are you only talking about North America? It is basically because to deconstruct what we understand from an Indian perspective. There are very diverse processes working, you know, and that is exactly the reason we have to understand that sometimes when you bring models of planning, say for instance from US or you know other places, we need to understand these processes. You see, like another classic example, I don't know whether how many of you have heard, you know, when the GNNURM started, for the first time in India they started what is known as the City Development Plan. Okay, and the US City Development Plan was already there in the 70s. Okay, and it is basically an investment plan, right? So these are, I think, some of the issues I think which I think will be. Therefore, what we would like to request you is that, you know, I was just thinking maybe if you must be thinking, okay, these are so different. But what I'm trying to say is, yes, that's why we are having this, so that you'll be able to at least relate or see how different they are, how processes are working, you know. So that is, sorry, I just.
No, that's good.
I thought you were tired, so something.
Yeah, I'm not used to doing sort of lectures, and I don't know. I was getting a lot of questions and discussions when I was talking about the millennials, but then everybody's been quiet. So I hope it's still interesting. But please ask and talk. It gives me a break and makes it more lively. Okay. Okay. And then finally, with kind of rising incomes and income disparities comes urban crime. So you see that guy has a lot of money, why not go and steal his car or rob him or something. Okay, a little bit more detail about this. I'll try to keep it fast because the lunch is already outside. Okay. So in general, rising consumption is there, right? So you have higher incomes, you want to consume more, and you want to consume higher order goods, right? So you don't want a Nokia sort of candy bar phone, you want an iPhone, or you want a Samsung Galaxy or something. You want like thin screen laptops, and you want LED TVs, and higher order services, higher goods. You don't want to go for a 10 rupee haircut. You want to go to a salon which will charge you 500 rupees to feel better about yourself, spending more money. You want to eat at fancy restaurants, drink more expensive wines, things like that. In general, it is a big opportunity in some sense because it brings up GDP of your country. Right? The more you consume, the more is produced, the more you produce, the more is consumed. And so it's a big sort of economic productivity opportunity. It's challenge for the environment, right? Because rising consumerism comes in all kinds of environmental challenges. So both opportunity and challenge. The biggest sort of indicator of rising income is car ownership. I can say that it's the same in Canada, it's the same in the US, it's same in India, and it's same in China, it's same in any country, right? So when people have money, they want to buy a car. The more money you have, the bigger your car is. The more money you have, more number of cars you have. It gives a lot of opportunities. So if you have a car, you are more mobile. You can go to more places, turn on air conditioning, pollution is cut out, play your favorite music, there's congestion, but your immediate space is comfortable, your mobility is increased, you can go to restaurants multiple times, you can go to see book fairs, you can whatever activity, more mobility, big opportunity for everything in the city, right? You can maybe do a job which is much further out, right? Because you have a car now, you can drive to a better paying job or a job that you really like that's in your sort of domain. All of that opportunities. Traffic congestion, big challenge. Delhi definitely, but any city, more cars More mobility, more traffic. May or may not congestion, but more traffic. Lots of pollution, and a big social equity challenge. Right? And we'll get into this a lot more detail when we start getting into transportation, but very briefly here. So when you have a society that's built around the car, like Canadian or American cities that are built around the car, you are leaving behind people who either cannot drive, and that could be for so many reasons, right? Either you are too old to drive or you are too young to drive. Maybe you don't have the ability to drive, right? Maybe you are physically challenged. Maybe you don't earn enough to buy a car. Maybe you don't earn enough to put petrol every day in your car. So you may have a car, but you may not have enough money to drive it as much as you would like to. Big social equity challenge, right? So then this sort of segment of society is stuck, right, in spaces, certain pockets of the city which have better public transportation access, and they can only go to work at places that have public transportation access. Right? And most Canadian and American cities, such places or such locations are very few in the city. And there is a whole literature on just this topic called spatial mismatch. You can Google that up by John King, spatial mismatch. So the jobs are where people are not able to travel if they don't have a car. So people are somewhere else, jobs are somewhere else, spatial mismatch, right? Big social media. Okay. A big opportunity with rising income is that people tend to get more educated, that people tend to get more environmentally aware over time. So there is a curve, right? Initially you may not care much about the environment, you're very consumer oriented and consumption oriented. But as a society, as a society gets richer, in general, it will be more active in protecting environment and social issues and so on and so forth. Right? And it has happened in both US and Canada. And you can see a little bit in India as well. So cities where there is more wealth, in cities where there is more wealth, people are richer, they tend to participate more in sort of these environmental issues. Maybe it's lip service, maybe it's just pretense, right? So you go participate in a march against something like Aravalli Hills, and then you go home and then you start drinking water out of plastic water. Right? So that's possible. But in general, there is a strong correlation between money and environmental issues. Yes.
I just want to add a point that I recently came across that recently I was also going through this topic, and I found that Instagram basically is also providing a lot of it's also getting very useful in for this environmental activism, and not only environment, also for social issues like rape and also like women's issues and other issues also like increasing social awareness. So they are recently using the term Instavism, like Instagram and activism. So
right.
That's one.
Yeah. So good point. So I mean, social media and internet connectivity has given people the opportunity to connect with issues very fast, right? So something happens on GNU campus, you put it up on different platforms, and you might start getting support from universities as far as the US or Canada, right? Depending on what's in the issue and how people connect to that.
Now we expect you to support us.
Okay. Now with rising incomes has also come big rising income disparities, right? And that's sort of also very, very global. And if you look at the first point, since 2015, just last 2 years, the richest 1% own more wealth than the rest of the planet. In the last 2 years, the richest 1% more than the rest of the 99%. Just imagine the kind of disparity that we have. That's kind of global. The top eight global, same amount of wealth at the poorest half, right? Might have changed a little bit in last 1 week because the Dow Jones went down, right? So their wealth might have decreased a bit, and the poor don't own any stock, so their wealth remains the same. So perhaps, not poor half, but maybe 49%, something like that. Okay. Now this is just a projection, but still, stock. Over the next 20 years, 500 people will hand over $2.5 trillion. I don't even know how many zeros go in there, to their area, right? To the next one. But this you can, larger than the GDP of India, right? And GDP of India is now third, fifth?
I think, yeah.
Yeah, we're very high, right? Just because, population base is so high, but definitely top. Incomes of poorest 10% of people increased by less than $3 a year between, it's a long period, 20 plus years. Income of the richest 1% increased to 182 times as much, right? So do the math, but big. So this chart here sort of shows you, income disparities in Canada, right? In Canada. So big income disparities, big. And increasing. Okay. So, and this graphic here shows you your question about, who goes to private school. So private school, rich kids, uniforms, blazers, all of that. And you cannot see it very clearly because the projector is not that great, but this is a public school by the uniform, I think it's New York. And they're going through a metal detector. It's a public school, and guns are a big problem. Just yesterday there was a shooting in Florida where some expelled student came in and shot 18 people to death just yesterday. It's a big issue. So some of these tough neighborhoods, not all schools are like this, a small percentage, but there are schools like this where children have to walk through a metal detector because they might be carrying a knife or a gun or a weapon, right? So, income disparity. Okay. Interesting stuff. Rise of the internet. Rise of the internet. Pretty much everybody in the US and Canada, everywhere, ubiquitous, right? Everywhere. Internet is available everywhere. It could be through your cell phone, it could be through a dongle, it could be through a Wi-Fi hotspot, it could be through cable. But I think the only time I was without the internet in Canada was we took a train trip from Vancouver to Toronto. It's a 4-day train trip, and it goes through hundreds of kilometers of wilderness. Like there's nobody living within 100 kilometers. And so there are patches there where your phone does not get internet signal. You get phone but not internet signal. And other than that, like I have not been to any city. You go to any corner and you can get almost free internet. Like a lot of stores, coffee shops, they just give you free Wi-Fi. And they're not doing a social service, they're tracking all the information from your phone. They're getting, all valuable data from you, and they're giving you free Wi-Fi in return, right? It's everywhere. High definition global telecommunication. It says inexpensive, but it's almost free everywhere, right? So I am presently in India, but my office is still working in Canada, right? It's a term, and I have to participate in meetings and such. And so I've told them that, if you pull me in a meeting before noon local time, and offices start really early in Canada, right? So we start working at 8 o'clock or 8:30 latest. I'll be able to join in. And in the last 4 days, I've already done 2-hour meetings, right, over Skype. So they start at 8:30 over there, it's 7 in the evening over here. And I'm very easily able to, with my laptop and that Geo file thing, I'm able to do a video chat with him. So I could be anywhere and anywhere working on it. This is redefining both work and workplace, and I think I have a slide for that. So, and that has profound implications for cities. all this put together. Ubiquitous internet, the way people communicate, and relation between work and workplace, and work-home relationship. It has had a huge impact on the way people travel, right? Internet. So Uber and Ola and all those services that we have, only because of the internet. Right? Only because of the internet and smartphones. You can do a whole lot of travel planning now using the internet, which you were not able to do before. Right? So all public transit, public transportation schedules, they are all online. If you go to Google Maps, and if you can plan your day in Google Maps, and it will tell you how to plan your day in terms of travel. If a particular road or a street is becoming congested, it will immediately route you to a less congested, right? So it's more efficient use of street infrastructure made possible because we have so much real-time connection, right? So Google Maps within seconds knows that this street is getting congested because all of those people who have Google phones, Google on their phones are traveling slower in space. So their computers pick this information in real time. They don't need information from somebody else. Like they are tracking all the phones. Like they are able to tell, right? And so it immediately reflects. They immediately route you. I don't know of anybody in US or Canada who travels without some sort of a GPS ever since GPS came, right? And so either you may have a GPS device standalone that you keep in car, or now you use your phone. Profound impact on the way people travel. Rise of e-commerce. So you can buy pretty much anything on the internet these days, right? When we bought our first car, that was way back in 2004, we bought it off the internet, literally, right? So we went to the website, car retailer website. We entered all the things that we wanted in our car. We had, went out and looked at all the models and everything. And then website started a bidding process for us, right? So we sent our requirements to 5 dealers. So those 5 dealers gave price quotes, and then we chose the one that was giving the lowest price, and we entered all our details and everything. So the transaction was completed on the internet. Then all we had to do was walk in, physically hand over a check, because this was 2004, and drive out with our car. And the whole interaction inside the car showroom was less than 30 minutes. If I were to buy a car today, probably I'll not even have to do that 30-minute transaction. The money will be transferred electronically, and I may not even see a person over there, right? And somebody will just be making it. You can buy food online, you can buy groceries online, order chow mein online, anything online, everything. It's grown pretty big in India, pretty reliable as well.
Yeah, I think I just want to chip in, and one of the interesting thing about this internet and e-commerce and other thing is, again, to understand its impact on space. I'll just give you an example from Netherlands. There is a small town called Leiden, not very far from Amsterdam. And as you were saying, many of these cities, the city council, they use revitalization. Say commercial space, they will have one street, and European or American cities you go, they will develop a street, and it becomes very vibrant in the weekends, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And it was very interesting, that place is a small, of course, historic town and very famous university located there. What was interesting for me was to, how the spatial character changes, They developed that street to rejuvenate the local economy, and the online shopping boom comes, and the footfall decreases in the shops. Are you getting what I'm trying to say? The number of people visiting the shop goes down, and when the sale transaction goes down, then they are not able to pay the rent. So the shop closes, right? So this is very, very, so what one is trying to link it up with, you plan a street, okay, because as a planning strategy to revitalize the economy, and then this particular technology comes and it changes the whole way how, the things move, okay, 1 or 2 guys, maybe Amazon will control, he will have some hubs, one particular place working, and then this tree starts suffering. Okay, so I think these are very, very important, aspect to understand in terms of changes. How, see, at the end of the day, many of the things are also, as a planner, one talks about space. How does space change? And one thing we need to understand with the technology is that, if you look into the technological changes and innovations that is taking place in the world, the wavelength, it is becoming smaller. So if you have 100 years for one technology to come up and another, say, last few years back, these days the innovation is very rapid. So what happens that when the innovation is very rapid, the cities have to restructure the economy very rapidly. I can give you example again of China. Think of Shenzhen, and I have, of course, Shenzhen basically developed as a manufacturing hub, right? Now what is happening is that, within a span of 30 years, Shenzhen's history is not more than 30-35 years. But they have to reinvent themselves, and they are getting transforming from simple, manufacturing to high digital thing, because lot of these technological changes, the labor cost has made Shenzhen not very competitive vis-a-vis other economies. Okay, so I think one has to really, as a planner, as a urban economist, a geographer, whatever it may be, I think the technology and its impact on the cities will have to be understood. There are very less research being done. Okay, one of the things that he talked about is the big data, and who controls it, and how do you use it. But people like us, you and me, don't even have access to big data. You see, so I think these are the political economic context of technology, institution. I think this is one thing which we'll have to really understand in the future of the cities, and the cities going through transformation.
Okay. No, it's fine. So I'm talking and Shravan is talking. But feel free to chip in, because we might have missed on things about how internet influences cities and spaces. So feel free to pitch in, and you all use.
Can I say something?
Yeah, please. Ajay or Dr. Agarwal, please. Sir is not.
I would like to add to this that the discourses, the popular discourses that gets created in a city is getting mediated or formed by the social media or the new media, if we say, like if we talk about intolerance, like with multiculturalism and the cosmopolitanism, we are also moving towards a very destructive force of like intolerance and the retrograde ideologies that is taking place, which is again is getting regulated or formulated or shaped, or the new discourses that is taking place with the social media. Like anything happening anywhere, or for example, if I take the case of JNU, not only we are getting support, but then there is a fear is also being created that this is a medium where anti-nationalism is like taking birth or whatever.
This is a space where anti-nationals live, right?
Exactly, for that. So then there is also this this discourse of hate, or Islam, in that case of Islamophobia, which we talked about, is also getting regulated by this popular media, this internet. So along with its positive impacts, the technology that we are living today has a lot more destructive impacts also in creating discourses.
Absolutely, I think that's a very interesting point.
Very, very true. Yes. So like I said earlier, internet has and telecommunication, advances in telecommunication have redefined work and the workplace, right? So, like I said, I was staying with my cousin and in Gurgaon, and I was working for my university in Canada, right? So I'm working, but I'm not in office. Okay. I don't remember, but probably I was wearing a t-shirt and shorts, right? Definitely not office wear, but I was working. So that kind of work and work-home relationship has changed. 50 years back, it was unthinkable that you will do a meeting sitting at home, like you had to be in office. And it changed a little bit with better telephones, the mobile telephones, so you could kind of call in your office and I see people in India all around me doing business everywhere. Like they are on the phone giving instructions to somebody or negotiating in metro, and everywhere people are just doing business all the time on the phone. Telecommuting is an interesting concept. So in telecommuting, you are actually working from home. So telecommute, working from home, working from far. And that is something that has been made possible by communication technology and also policy support. So one of the ways to reduce traffic congestion is let people work from home, so you are not traveling to work. So you are driving it. That's at least one less car per person, and if you can get a sizable percentage of city population to work from home, and then different people do this on different days, then your traffic goes down on a city. So very. In general, it has given rise to a lot of collaboration globally, right? So I'm physically here, but this course has been made possible because I and Shravan were able to collaborate over email and phones for almost a year. So we wrote the proposal for this course exactly 1 year back, right? Exactly 1 year back, February 2017. We must have exchanged, dozens of emails, if not hundreds of emails, trying to make this collaboration work. So this is kind of a low-end collaboration. We are doing emails, but people work in real time on big projects. Right? So guys like Amazon and Microsoft have hundreds of people working on the same project, plugging in from different parts of the world. Right? So all of that. So it increases efficiency and productivity of the economy overall. Rise of the e-commerce. So Amazon, Flipkart, things like that. Very, very inexpensive goods, cheaper compared to a store because they don't have to have a showroom and then hire people to show you things, and then if you don't like it, put it back on the shelf, pay rent, pay electricity, pay air conditioning, all of that. So they save on all that money, and then a part of that saving they pass on to the customer. So the same Hawkins pressure cooker that costs 2,000 rupees in a store, I can buy on Amazon for 1600 rupees. I know that because I just did that 2 days back. I had to take something back for my wife, and so
she asked for pressure cooker.
Yeah.
So the cultural connect is still there.
Futura, non-stick, hard anodized. Anyway, okay, so all of that, and then it's 24-hour shopping. So I was not doing this between 10 to 8, normal hours when store is open. I might have done it at 4 a.m. or 5 a.m. because I've been waking up really early because of jet lag. Everybody's sleeping, so I'm on Amazon website doing shopping. So it has a lot of consumer benefits. You can shop from home, you can do a lot of comparison shopping, you can go to 50 different websites for the same pressure cooker, do comparison, all of that, who will give good warranties. And then if you're buying something electronic, you can go and read reviews, whether this laptop is good and whether this retailer is good, whether they'll honor warranty, all of that. So you literally have a storefront in your palm, right? So my phone, I can access millions of stores worldwide, right? Millions of worldwide. So big sort of economic opportunity. So I don't have it. It is also a big challenge. Because like Shravan said, if you're doing so much shopping online, if you're spending so much money online, then what happens to those physical stores? If all of us, everybody in India starts buying everything through Amazon and Flipkart, what will happen to those small Perchun and Kirana stores? Right? Amazon model is a little bit different because they've tied up with these small corner stores, and so if you buy a packet of biscuit from them, probably it's a corner store guy who's delivering it to you. Amazon is just getting a cut for facilitating that transaction. But even so, the big challenge that American and Canadian cities have faced is because of rise of e-commerce, physical stores have shut down. and there have been store closures on entire blocks of buildings and entire streets and entire neighborhoods, to the extent that it's scary to walk down those streets because all you see is closed signs. And if your stores are 20 stores are closed in a row of 30 or 40 or 50 stores, it's very scary to walk down that street. Right? It's not a good sight. And lots of stores have really invented themselves. So all the big retailers like Walmart used to be the largest retailer in both US and Canada. It has a big online presence. And same goes for all major stores in the US and Canada. But these are big stores who can afford to have big data warehouses and this kind of supply chain networks, not small grocery stores, and not small corner stores, and not small boutique stores. So it has a big challenge in some sense for planners, because unless there are stores, you will not go to that particular part. It's shopping that keeps the streets lively.
Interestingly, I also want to make a small point. When planners plan, there are certain norms and standards. Okay, say for instance, when you plan a neighborhood, you know that there are a small retail shop that has to exist. Now, in such a situation, what happens to these norms? Right? Are you getting what I am trying to say? When you look at the planning document, there are norms and standards. Okay, neighborhood plan, so you need a small kindergarten school, you need a maybe community hall, maybe a retail shop. That's what we have been taught. If you remember some of these theories, they tell like that. But the point is, if these things is happening, and if certain retail stores are not relevant, then how do you plan? What planning norms do you create for planning the neighborhoods in future? So what I'm basically trying to say is that just like the physical transformation of a city, I think the challenge for planners and urbanists is basically how do you also change your norms with the changing technology and its impact on the city. I think these are very, very critical issues. Because if you don't change with the technology, then your plans are going to be redundant.
I would like to add something. Another trend is coming up, like these online biggies are also trying to open up brick and mortar stores because they understand that consumerism or shopping is an experience and personalized. So maybe the small grocery like kirana stores are not working. I think they are making their presence here.
With the benefit,
education system also will change.
What?
Education system also will change because now I can, if there is a good portal, it's already all the lectures I can attend from MIT and Harvard, or even any postgraduate course I can sit here. Maybe the primary education possibly will survive because it is required a one-to-one interaction, but higher studies, it is not really required for a large number of disciplines to go to university and study. You can write an assessment system. It's already happening in universities.
Yep.
So mobility of people and coming and staying in a hostel, living there, all those things will change.
Yeah.
Somebody here wanted to say something.
The benefit of the small grocery convenience stores is you can buy in whatever quantities you would like to. Given the percentage of low-income groups in Indian cities we have, of course the kirana stores and the convenience stores will definitely be alive for a long time, I feel. And coming to the distance education time, it works for people who are in professional work thing, because you can still work and do a course. I would not feel that a parent would want, because in India parents have so much dominance over kids until 30s also. So I don't think parents would want their kids to do a post-graduation study sitting at the home.
Right.
They would still want them to go to IITs and good education.
Just hold on. Let's keep it a little bit structured. So I want to respond to her. She wanted to say something, and then you can say something. Okay, in the same order. So to remain optimistic about corner grocery store, kirana store, is good. I will not count on it, okay? Because the same points were made in the US and Canada 20 years back. Okay. internet is very new. It's not that it has taken 50 years to wipe out entire chains of stores, family-owned businesses completely off business. It has taken them less than 20. And this is just starting in India. So don't bet on that. Like, it could change completely. A challenge for planners is once that store closes down, how do you use that space? Right? Because it's prime real estate, you have to plan for some sort of adaptive reuse. And it's only about now that Canadians and Americans have started to figure out how to sort of put these closed storefronts to alternate uses, or how to sort of revitalize or reuse them in some ways. But don't count that they will. Things change very fast. Yeah, go ahead. You are responding to me?
Yes, I feel the threat is much higher to the storefronts, which are larger storefronts, not much higher threat to the smaller stores where we can buy clothes from Mindra and Jabong. We would not prefer to go lifestyle stores, or we can buy cosmetics also. So the threat is to the much larger complexes, shopping malls.
So I agree partially. All I'm saying is that, we can speculate.
Yes,
that is
I
of
agree
no
to what
use.
you.
But if you go by the US and Canadian example, it did not take very long. In a life of a city, 15 years is not that long, right? And so that is. Okay. So you and then.
What I would want to add is, the real challenge is how much technological intervention do we want in our life, and to what level we need to stop it, be it in shopping or distance education or whatever, because something can be done by human interventions only and something has to be done by technological interventions. So where we draw the line, and what will be that thin line, and what will be the common space between human interventions and technological interventions.
Right.
This is the major challenge what a planner and even individual has to think about. Also, I would like all of us to see one TED talk by Devdatta Patnaik, India is not chaotic, where he very clearly mentions the culture of Canada, US and the Indian scenario. What is chaotic in USA or Canada cannot be chaotic here. But maybe we are turning to that stage where we think in that compartment wise. So how do we deal with all those factors and still have development index like US and Canada, and have social connections integrated? So that would be a real challenge, and for all of us.
Yeah. So, I hear you. The only thing I would say is that with a lot of internet creativity, I don't think we have any choice, right? So, if an app is put out and it helps people do things more efficiently and saves time and saves money, then you really cannot slow down that process, right? Look at Uber. It was not present in India until maybe 2 years back. And it's now everywhere. I went to Lucknow last time I came, and there's Uber in Lucknow, and I could never in my life imagine that a city as conservative as Lucknow will have Uber drivers. But yeah, please.
I was just thinking in context of this revitalization of city spaces, that how in European cities the whole shopping culture, all the stores would shut by 5 or 6 o'clock. And we can never imagine that in India, and how people shop. I think that has something to do with how city spaces work. So probably in India we don't need cafes and bars to keep the city center alive, because we shop till say 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock and 10 o'clock also. But in Europe it's unimaginable. You come out of a conference or your work or your office on a weekday, you cannot find any store apart from say Migros or any other supermarket.
That's by law.
Yeah.
That's by law in Europe.
So that is that's what city planners, that could be imposed in India as well, I'm assuming, but we don't do it because we keep our city spaces alive by letting that transaction and that commercial spaces alive, because we know that Indians are not, we can go to a pub or a cafe, but our parents would never do that.
Yeah, so that is there. Also, weather has a big role to play, right? So it gets so hot for a very large part of the year that you have to keep stores open late evening and late night. You want to?
Yeah, I just wanted, it's a very interesting point, He talked about multicultural immigrants, and I can cite the example from the UK. You see, there are a large number of white, Britishers, who have shops, and as you rightly said, they close the shop. They open at 9, they close at 5. But the Indians will open at 7 and close at 10. And that is a conflict, It is also maybe about values, culture, but also because the immigrant wants to survive, he wants to sell. But the white American or the British are saying he's encroaching, he's violating the rule and affecting my business. So I think these are very important aspect of understanding the city dynamics, which normally we tend to fail. The other thing you talked about, again that pubs and all that. I think they are part of their culture, that lifestyle. Okay, in some ways. Now, of course, India is changing, so Delhi has become much more vibrant than what I had seen 10, 15 years back, You just think of Connaught Place, the way Connaught Place has changed, it's unimaginable. If you basically go in the night, once upon a time it used to get closed at 7 or 8. Now you go till 11, it is very different. Yeah.
That is also by law, by the way. That is by law that they have to shut it down.
Yeah, exactly.
Then we open till 4.
Yeah, that's what. But now because you are allowing eateries to come up and pubs to come up, the whole character of CP has changed, right? And as he was rightly saying, and if you go and see the crowd, who are they? They are the the young guys, And of course, another interesting thing in CP is the metro has changed the connectivity. And you have to factor in this thing, very important. Okay? So what one is talking about is, I think, understanding these dynamics is very important. And of course, we always have to understand in the context of space, and then it becomes more meaningful. And
yes,
I think we are getting late for
lunch.
lunch.
I will just take 2 minutes. Because this will be, so what I have next will be a good session for after the break or tomorrow. But just close on this, so we can have a discussion on this after lunch, and probably you can read this or you don't have to discuss. But there was a time when America and Canada and planners were leading the smart growth movement, right? That was back in the 90s. And for those of you who don't know smart growth, so smart growth was that if we continue to build cities around the car, we will be we will remain dumb, right? So that's not the smart way to grow. We cannot keep building these big houses and spread out sprawling cities where everybody has to drive. We have to build our cities compact. We have to do things that make people drive less. That will be better for the environment. They will be better for the society. All of that. From that, the discourse has now come to smart cities. India is big, or at least Modi is big on smart cities, and the same is kind of global, right? So Canada has right now a smart cities challenge out there, and it's basically about monitoring of your services and infrastructure, and the challenge is out there, and the cities are sort of bidding for this, and they're not getting any money, they'll just get a plaque or an award or something, a big award, but it has come so far, right? So rather than talk about environment and all those things, we're talking about efficiency and this and so let's close here. Lunch is outside.
Yeah.
So you can all have lunch. When are we meeting again? Let's set up a time.
When do you want to meet?
How long you want to? Yeah.
30 minutes.
30? That will be too short.
That is the lunch hour.
We need to order.
1 hour, but then you'll have to be willing to stay a little longer if required. Huh?
Maybe 40.
Okay, let's say it's a little bit before 2. Come back here at 2:30. You can take your food, go anywhere and eat. Come back here at 2:30. You'll start with a light conversation and then do something.
After the